Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life.
Amen.
Christ is risen.
Truly he is risen.
Christos anesti.
Alithos anesti. We're so excited to have you. Everybody, I think I see a lot of familiar names, so I'm still going to do Zoom reminders, but while I'm doing that, if you would like to grab something to journal with, Krista's going to have you spend some time answering some journal questions before we share tonight. So grab yourself a piece of paper, a pen, the journal you like to keep all your amazing spiritual notes in while I give the Zoom reminders. So tonight for Zoom reminders, whenever we pause for a question, we will either instruct you to answer the question in the chat or to raise your hand so you can come up on the screen. If you raise your hand, I'll bring you up so you can interact with Krista and myself and, God willing, Andrew. And if someone says something similar to what you were going to say, no worries. You always can just put your hand down and save your amazing thoughts for the next round. With that, I will go ahead and give our announcements. If we are still looking for district student leaders for some of the districts, especially if you live in the Southeast, Mid-Atlantic, or mountain regions, we would love for you to reach out to us and apply to be a district student leader. In a second, I'll drop the link in the chat since I'm doing two people's jobs right now. Andrew! Hooray! He's here. And then keep an eye out for our announcement for online Summer Leadership Institute. We have more details to come soon, but June 5th, all the details will be out and registration will be open for you to join this year's Leadership Institute through the month of July. Andrew, anything else you'd like to add besides district student leaders and SLI and any votes you have on or thoughts and feelings you have about Koulourakia?
Koulourakia. Is that the one that's also known as Phoenicia?
No, that's Melo Macarona and Phoenicia. Those are the honey ones. Are those your favorite?
Yes, those are my favorite, but I'm not sure, I'm not Greek, so I can't really decide on which one is right, but I always hear which one is right. So, but yeah, stay ready for our online SLI. We're going to have a lot of cool things coming, and just be ready for a lot of new fun things coming next year, because it's definitely going to be an interesting year, but we're ready to make the best of it. So
awesome. Okay. With that, we're going to toss it over to Krista, and you just let me know when you're ready for the slide.
Sure. Well, thank you, Christina, and thank you, Andrew. It's also nice to meet you, Andrew.
You as well.
Thank you. So my name is Krista. I currently reside in upstate New York in a little town called Cortland. I live here with my husband, and we attend Holy Apostles Orthodox Church, which is a little OCA mission parish in Lansing, New York. We're turning 10 years old this year, so that's very exciting.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes. And I am an OCF alumna. I didn't really take advantage of OCF as an undergraduate. So for those of you who are current undergrads and you're plugged into OCF, that's awesome. I really started taking advantage in grad school. And then once I graduated, I studied nutrition. Once I graduated, I got a job in the same place where I went to school. So I was kind of sticking around OCF even as a young professional. I don't know if any of you have people in your OCF that are kind of sticking around, can't let go. So that was really cool. I couldn't get enough of it. And at that time, I was working, and still am, working as a registered dietitian doing nutrition counseling. And I was mostly working with, really people of all ages, but mostly people with certain chronic diseases, looking to manage those through nutrition and lifestyle changes. So as part of OCF, we were always looking to bring in speakers, and on a whim, I just said, how about we ask Rita Madden? So she's an Orthodox podcaster and author, and she's also a registered dietitian. She lives in Hawaii. I don't know why she agreed to come to upstate New York in the winter, but she did. And it was amazing. She opened my eyes to how we can put caring for our bodies and good nutrition and, you know, these healthy habits that I was preaching in the office, how we can put those in an Orthodox lens. And it really just opened it up for me so much. And this is actually her book. I have it right here. I don't know if it's flipped for you or not, but Food, Faith, and Fasting. So highly would recommend this book. It's just full of a lot of really practical tips on how to make that connection between caring for your body and then caring for your soul. And that's what really drew me to this maxim. Right? It's a really simple statement, as all of the maxims are, but there's a lot that we can really dig into. So I'm excited to do that tonight. And I'm pretty casual, so if you just have questions, there's going to be a lot of opportunities to share your thoughts and experiences. But if you have questions at any time, please just go ahead and ask me. So tonight we're going to split the maxim into 3 parts. So eat good foods in moderation and fast on fasting days. I'll be asking you about good food, moderation, and your experiences with fasting. So start to think about your current understanding of those concepts and your thoughts related to those topics. And in the meantime, we'll start off with some journaling. So Christina's going to pop up our slide here. But I want you to call to mind the last time that you ate. And I'm not going to ask you to write down your serving sizes or your nutrient content, none of that. I want you to set the scene. So where were you? You know, what were you doing? Were you doing anything else while eating? Were you with anyone? Were you talking? What kind of mood were you in? What else was around you? How long did it take you to eat? How'd you feel after you ate? What was the first thing you did right after you ate? So you don't have to answer all of these questions, but they're just to get your brain churning a little bit as you really dive into that, the last time you ate. And while you do that, I'm going to go grab the cool rakia my mom sent me today. So for those of you wondering what they are, they're like the little Greek butter cookies. Looks like this. Snack.
And why don't you throw in the chat a thumbs up or an exclamation point or something to let us know when you're finished journaling.
I love the enthusiastic exclamation points.
You know, it's interesting. I never really think about how much like goes on around food. Like all of these questions, just like even like these are things I don't even think about when I think about my meals. So.
Well then, this is going to be a fun chat.
Oh, absolutely. I'm very excited for this.
All right. Do you think it's time to move on? All right. So if you are still thinking, still journaling, you can continue to do that. And we're going to jump into the very first part of the Maxim. So eat good food. Well, I want to know from you, what is good food? And also, what makes food good? So you can answer either or both of those questions. And you can think about your answer to that question or those questions, but also your family's answer, your friends' answers, society's answers, right? There's a lot of answers here.
Yeah.
Raise your hand or throw it in the chat, and we'd love to hear what you have to say.
I guess I'll go first while we're doing this, but for me, nutrition has been a big part of my family's lifestyle, because after my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, we completely changed all our eating habits. So we integrated a lot more plant-based foods and went a lot more organic. So that's what I see as healthy food, because that's part of what's helped her stay in remission for so long. So that's definitely what I see as good food, and definitely something I try to emulate in my diet nowadays.
Yeah. It's interesting that you tacked on the word healthy there, right? So good to you sounds like healthy, and
Yes.
healthy is plant-based, or foods that are found a little more naturally from the earth.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Matthew says from Baba and Dido's garden. I'm not going to try to guess which language we're saying there. Anybody?
Sounds Slavic. Baba and Dido.
Macedonian.
Oh.
The tricky in between.
Yes.
And what I love
say more? What makes that good?
Let's hear what you have to say, Matt. Come on up. If you want to.
Here he comes, always. Always a treat.
Yes.
Would it be OCF at home if we didn't get to bring Matthew up on the screen?
This wouldn't be the same.
That warms my heart. Anyway, I've always had this ever since I was a boy. My dad would grow his garden and then make food from it. So it was always like the roasted red peppers he'd have. And he'd collect them all at the end of August, and then we'd get the barbecue out, and it would be just this big party. And it was something about eating food that I know that people I loved put a lot of effort into it. And I'm also saying, like, it was homegrown. Like, that stuff just tastes better. There was something about being able to spend time with the people that I loved, eating food that they lovingly prepared, and not only just prepared, but they had grown for the past 5 months. They've been preparing. My dad starts his garden inside in like March. We just planted it actually yesterday. He starts these plants very, very small in March, and in the middle of Lent, and plants them and then harvests them, and then we eat them. And I don't know how to describe it. I normally have fun ways to like describe all the other topics that I talk about, and like have some like punchline. I don't have one for this one. It's family. It's sitting around a table and smiling with people and eating good food with people. And I don't know, we Orthodox people like to eat, but like, what does that mean? I don't know. Maybe I'm just crazy.
No, I love that it has a story that's connected to like the experience for you.
Yeah. Something else I liked was, like you said, the process of it. You know, food is not just, it doesn't start with the meal and it doesn't end with the meal either. It's like, you have to look at the whole lifespan of it. It's such an interesting way to look at things.
Absolutely. Food is an incredibly personal thing, right? It's a very intimate thing. I loved Matthew's example, you know, because in that meal is a connection to your grandparents. It's a connection to the earth, a connection to God, I would argue. So that, and it sounds like Kira has a similar thought here. My sisters and I do a lot of cooking in the house, and it's always super satisfying to eat a meal you've cooked yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right, because there's that element of you've waited for it, right? You worked for it, which is quite different from our current food environment, right? Food is very accessible. We don't have to wait for it if we don't want to. Right, depending on where you live and your situation, you know, but there's always food at the checkout aisle. Restaurants are open, they'll deliver to you.
Well, maybe restaurants are open right now, right?
Maybe. That's true. Good point.
I think it's interesting though, because I feel like right now a lot of people are, you know, reconnecting with like a more home cooked meal experience. Not all the time or at every meal, but I think more people are getting that opportunity, or I don't know if it's an opportunity for everyone. Maybe for some people it's a burden, but they are getting more food made at home, made together, and it's kind of for me, it's nice, I think.
It's definitely been nice here.
Yeah.
Being able to eat together every night without having to run off to things.
Yeah, an element of pacing, right? When we slow down, like you said, Andrew, we can enjoy that meal with our family, or Kira, right? Having the time to be able to cook that meal at home from start to finish. It's scarce these days, but more recently, I think people have found themselves with a little more time, with that opportunity to reconnect to food in that way. Anybody else have any other thoughts about what good food is? There's really no wrong answer. Gyros or gyros,
yes, sir.
Right? What makes those so good, John? I'm just going to assume there's a little ... and he's typing. Oh, here he is.
I'm muted and I'm talking to you. It's good. That's really good. That was my party trick for the night, everyone. All right, John. Welcome.
Hello. Christos Anesti.
Alitos
Anesti.
Gyros. Our church does the annual Greek festivals, and our current one just got canceled for obvious reasons. In exchange, they have set up a gyro drive. You pre-order, and then you drive by, and they throw it into your car window as you drive by. But in addition to that, we also just decided to buy some lamb meat and made our own gyros tonight.
Ah, nice. And how was that?
Very delicious. Thanks to God.
Nice.
Awesome.
So taste, right? That wasn't actually something we really brought up quite yet, maybe implied.
Yeah, the food, like nutrition was one thing I was also going to say, but you got to it first. But of course, you know, the actual experience of having the food, the taste is important.
Yeah, I would I would agree, right? Food it can be a really joyful experience. We're supposed to like eating. We have to do it every day. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing that food can taste good. Yeah, so I'm hearing, what makes food good? It's healthy. It tastes good. There's that connection to family. Does good food imply that there's bad food?
What do you guys think?
Automatically, I kind of want to say yes, but looking back at the Maxim, it says good food in moderation. So that makes me think like anything is, like even dessert is good as long as you're not eating just dessert. So
I like it. Yeah. I like dessert is good. Any other thoughts?
I feel like we're getting tricked. So tell us what
No, there's no trick. Well, I love what you said, Andrew, that even dessert is good, because it's really easy in our society today, especially with the diet culture that's really pushed, to label foods as good and bad, right? Because that's easy for people in a way, right? If I can just label everything and I will always eat this and never eat that, well, then that's really easy and straightforward. But really what it turns into is, this worshiping of food and this demonizing of food, right? If I eat these foods, then this will be the cure. This is the thing that I'm looking for. Or assigning a morality to food, or like, this is bad food. I don't want anything to do with this. And then from there, it's not a far step to say that assign your self-worth to that. I'm good because I'm eating this good food, or I'm bad, or I'm horrible, or I feel guilty because I ate this bad food or this dessert, right? This off limits food. And I think we can see kind of the danger in that. And it reminds me of, there's a verse in 1 Corinthians 8:8, but food does not commend us to God, for neither if we eat are we better, nor if we do not eat are we the worse. So it's right there that how our morality has nothing to do with what we eat. And then to the answer to the question, is there bad food? It reminds me of a quote from Saint Maximus, the confessor, that Christina can pull up here as well. Nothing that God has created is in itself bad. Food is not bad, gluttony is. The procreation of children is not bad, lechery is. Wealth is not bad, avarice is. Glory is not bad, only vainglory is. So you see, nothing is bad in itself, only the misuse of it, which is the soul's negligence in cultivating its true nature. I'll let you sit with that for a moment.
I like what you said about like we don't have a moral, like there's not a morality to food, or like that we are not good or bad based on what we eat. I feel like that's important to hear.
Yeah. And what's good for me might not be what's good for you, and what's good for me today might not be good for me tomorrow, right? So it implies this sort of freedom, right? So we're not being ruled by food, and we're not a slave to our food choices, or a slave to some sort of external dieting rule. But it doesn't mean that nutrition and health don't matter, right? If eating good food in whatever way, in the many ways you've described it, is one way to kind of connect us to God and to care for our bodies and care for our souls in that way too. And that's where the moderation piece fits in, right? I think you were exactly right, Andrew. Your segue was perfect. Dessert's good, but we don't eat dessert for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So another question for you all. So, we hear moderation, right? That term gets thrown around a lot, especially with food. What does it feel like to practice moderation with food?
Raise your hand or you can put it in the chat. Oh, do you mean the same as fasting, Mark asks?
Fasting could be one way to practice moderation, but I don't think that it's the only way.
The diet thing made me think of this. If you think of diet as kind of extreme, maybe like having your cheat meal or your cheat day could be like that moderation, like you're giving yourself some kind of a relaxation or kind of the economia, that's the right word. I don't know if that's what I meant to say, but maybe that'll fit in there.
Dieting economia. So even dieting has to have moderation. Is that kind of what you were getting at?
Yeah.
Have you heard of the 80-20 rule? You can apply it to a lot of things, but I've heard 80-20, 90-10. I like 80-20, but it's basically like 80% of the time, you're choosing good foods in the way that you've defined good, right? They're nourishing for you. You're practicing moderation. 20% of the time, letting loose a little bit. Maybe we've let ourselves slip, or we don't pay too close attention, or we've overdone it. It leaves that room for self-forgiveness, which is really important. Because if we don't do that, then I think that's another trap to assigning your own self-worth with the foods you eat.
I feel like I remember, I'm going to totally misquote it, but there was one writer in the Philokalia who's talking about eating and not just fasting. And he described the different ways you feel when you eat certain amounts. And it really stuck with me. Like he talked about how you can have a feeling of, and I think this is what I associate with moderation. It's like you can have the feeling of being satiated, like you've been nourished, your body has what it needs, and that is a different feeling from being overly full. I don't remember exactly. I think he had 4 different ways he broke it down, but really the 2 that stuck with me were sort of this that feeling of your body has what it needs, you've had enough, you've enjoyed it even, and how it feels different within you than that feeling of, okay, I overdid it and I kind of actually feel miserable. And it's not a guilt misery, oh my gosh, I can't believe I ate a cookie misery. It's an actual, I cannot move and this is no longer enjoyable. The experience of eating has kind of been ruined by how much I let myself have. Does that make, I don't know. It's
absolutely, that makes sense. I use something in my practice all the time called the Hunger Fullness scale, 1 to 10, right? 1 is I'm starving, I could eat a horse. 10 is that Thanksgiving Day stuffed where you're yeah, I'm uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And there is a difference, like you mentioned, Christina, between satisfied, no longer hungry, and full. But what do we say when we're done eating? Like we sit down to a nice big family dinner and we're done. And we say, okay, I'm done. I'm full. Right? So there's like this expectation potentially to eat to that fullness point. But there is a non-hunger point, you know, a 6 or a 7. You also reminded me, Christina, in your comment about another quote. This one is Saint Silouan the Athonite. He says, "You must teach yourself how to eat less, but with discernment, insofar as your work allows. The measure of temperance should be such that after lunch you want to pray." What does lunch have to look like for you to want to pray afterwards? What does he mean by that?
What do you guys think? I'm putting the quote in for you guys.
It kind of makes me think like you eat the right food in the right amount such that you feel like energized and kind of empowered through like your nourishment to go about like whatever your task is for the afternoon, or not like the 2:30 crash.
Yeah, so something that was nourishing, gave you energy, like, yeah, food is fuel, but not weighing you down. Could be multifaceted. Mark says you have a degree of being hungry before, and you're also grateful to God after having it. I love that. You know, now might be a good time to go back to your journal prompt. What did you write down? Do you feel like the last time you ate, did you feel like praying afterwards? Did you, you know, you can replace lunch with whatever meal or snack you had. And what would you need to change about it to get you into that state that you wanted to pray, or as Mark said, that you felt grateful to God? And Eleni, yes, I love what you just said. Praying before or after dinner, maybe before and after dinner. I think that's a beautiful idea. That's a beautiful way to invite Christ to the table with you, or to the couch, or to your desk, you know, wherever you're eating. Because we all know we don't always get to the table for every time we eat.
I mean, I really resonated with me the idea of being a little hungry before you eat, because I feel like sometimes we just feel like we need to eat because it's like the time that it's supposed to happen. I think that really, in my experience, like that does help you build gratitude, helps you slow down and enjoy the food, but also then like be grateful that you had food and that you had time to eat it. So I feel like that part of like what Saint Silouan's saying really resonates with me.
Yeah, that hunger is a good thing.
Hunger is the greatest pickle, Ben Franklin, right?
Is the greatest what?
Pickle, which was an appetizer. So like being hungry is the best way to like have is the best appetizer for your meal. That was his
or hunger is the best sauce. That's a real saying. Or I heard it from her. I don't know if she originally said it, but I credit a lot of quotes to her. Because she's the first place I've heard it. My husband jokes about that with me all the time. Like, oh, Rita must have said it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, but being in touch with your hunger, right? Just being aware enough to know, am I hungry? or am I full, right? Or am I satisfied enough? All these things take a little bit of intuition, take a little bit of looking inside yourself, which is, something the church teaches. We do it in a lot of other ways, through prayer, preparing for confession, right? All of these things take a magnifying glass to the soul, and eating doesn't have to be different.
My kids have learned the difference between hunger and boredom recently, I feel like. And have come to confess, like, I'm hungry. Wait, I'm not hungry. I'm bored. Can you give me something to do? But it's good. It's good to have that awareness when you're 8 and not figure it out later.
Yes, that's a tricky one. That's one I talk about with my patients all the time, is trying to distinguish between those different kinds of hunger. Bored hunger, stress hunger. Emotional hunger. And
I also,
go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, I was just thinking, like, for me, I feel most like, I feel best in my like eating habits when it's like a schedule. Like I can get into like a routine of like eat like breakfast, lunch, and dinner consistently every day, because then it gets away from like having one meal where I'm just like getting all of my calories for the day, because that's not healthy. But kind of building in like that consistency.
Again, Andrew, you're coming in with the perfect segues.
I promise we didn't prepare, guys.
Clearly.
I think that's absolutely right. If we thrive on schedules and rhythms. And, I think what we're all going through right now is a perfect testament to what happens when we get thrown off of our schedules and thrown off of our rhythms. But certainly providing with your body with those regular meals is a way to nourish you. It helps you get in tune with your hunger and fullness cues, because it's a little confusing for your body, honestly, if you go a really long time without eating anything and then eat a lot, and it's tricky. It's a tricky thing. So, giving yourself those built-in times during the day to pause, and enjoy your food, kind of recharge, fill up the gas tank. That's important. And I think what the church does is there's that built-in rhythm when it comes to food in terms of the fasting and feasting calendar, right? And to go back to what Mark said at the very beginning of this part about moderation, it gives us a way to practice moderation. So instead of asking why we fast, I feel like there's a lot out there, a lot. There's just a lot of knowledge that's available to us in terms of why we fast and why it's a very important spiritual tool that we've been given in our church. I really particularly like one quote from St. Innocent of Alaska, and it's pretty long, so I'm going to have Christina pull it up. Let's see. Actually, Andrew, do you want to read it?
I'd love to.
Thank you.
Fasting is a voluntary self-restriction in food, drink, and pleasure. The purpose of fasting is to quiet or calm and lighten the body and to make it obedient to the soul. Overfilled flesh demands comfort and rest, disposing us to laziness, which hinders prayer and meditation. In the manner of an unbridled servant, the well-fed body rises up against its master, the soul, and wants to rule it. While fasting, you should limit not only the type of food, dairy and meat products, but also its amount, restricting yourself to minimal needs of the body. Then your fasting will become useful.
Thank you. So I want to hear from you all. How has fasting been useful for you? or how might it be useful?
This is definitely a raise your hand question. You could
Take some time, read it again. There's a lot there. This is why I picked it.
I'm okay too if you want to share how you find fasting to be not useful or difficult, and maybe that will help us come to a better understanding of how it is useful.
Thank you, Christina.
Come on. I'm very patient, and also I'm not a good singer, so watch out. It's coming.
The silence means that everyone is thinking really hard.
Okay.
And it's a really good question. That's what I tell myself. Practicing silence, inner and outer, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, Andrew, what do you want to say?
What do I want to say? Well, fasting has been a really interesting journey. And one of the most interesting parts with it for me was that when I came to college and joined OCF, I found a community of people to share that fasting experience with, which was really cool. So one of the ways we shared that fasting experience was a lot of times we would go to, like on Wednesday, we would go to a pre-sanctified together, and obviously fast before receiving communion. And then we would be able to break that fast together afterwards by going to one of our favorite Lenten restaurants at school. So in a way, the fasting did bring the community as well. So it was like the self-discipline, but then also the support of the people around you.
Yeah, Andrew, I love that, because what it really highlights, and this is something that Christina and I talked about when we were first talking about this Maxim, that fasting is not something, or the way we fast is not something that we choose, right? It's not a diet that we choose to prescribe to because we want to make certain changes to our body, right? It's something that's given to us by the church, and we're doing it together as a parish or as one body, right? Wow, how much cooler is it when you think about it that way, right? There's you're basically giving, you're handing it to God in that way. So thank you, Andrew. That was a really great frame.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
Would anybody be willing to share? Have you experienced any of the things you're told you're supposed to experience from fasting? I mean, maybe even just Krista and Andrew could answer. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like when I hear a sermon about fasting, like, oh, well, if I fast, then I'll have self-control in something small so that I can have better control in something else. Or it helps me refocus so that I can spend more time in prayer. Or fasting is supposed to help us counter some other temptation that's coming along. I'm just curious, from your own experience of fasting, like, have any of those, like, this is what's supposed to happen things been part of the experience? Or does it still feel kind of disconnected from the rest of your life?
I saw John mention temptation in the chat. And I think at least adjusting at first, like if you think about the first weeks of Lent, it is an adjustment to that regimen. So I do find myself for lack of a better word, getting a little hangry.
Mm.
Like it is a lot. I think a lot of times I do see the downside, like not the downside to fasting, but like kind of a downturn in my overall attitude. But then because of that, I'm able to rise up from that. And that I feel like that it's like that you go farther than you would have if you would have just not done it at all. So.
Elena said, I think fasting allows us to think, allows us to become more aware of what we are putting into our bodies, and allows us to think about what is coming out of our mouth as well.
Yes, absolutely. It gives us an opportunity to say no, right? To deny ourselves something that we want, right? We talked about kind of the immediacy of the availability of food. It gives us that opportunity to be like, I have this bodily desire right now, and I can choose to not satisfy it. And it's not that we're saying no forever. We're just waiting, right? If it's a Wednesday, we're waiting until Thursday. If it's Lent, we're digging our heels in a little more. We're waiting until Pascha. But it's just waiting. I'm looking for another fasting quote, but that Elena reminded me of with her comment. Does God need us to fast? I like Gregory's comment.
I think fasting for me is like most spiritual practices. Like the work that we do in the spiritual life is not something God needs. It's what we need to be receptive to Him. And a person who's filled with their own desires and their own needs, or not their own needs, but their own desires, and satisfying their pleasures primarily, doesn't have necessarily space to have God in us, and then to see the needs of others.
Mm-hmm.
Along kind of similar lines, I think the reason that fasting is so important is because it's so obvious, like when you are and when you aren't. You know what I mean? Like you were talking about like the passions. Food is like the most in our face in terms of like the passions that we struggle with. So when we're able to control something so tangible and so physical, then we can start to also take control of things that are really like trapped in our mind, and that we really can't see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a perfect segue again into the quote I did find. I do want to bring up Jonathan's point too. Hi, Jonathan. He says, I don't think God needs us to fast, but He uses fasting as a way to build us up. Absolutely. That, He's giving this to us as a way to bring us closer to Him, right? Closer to union with Him, which, is a theme, is on basically the goal of the Christian life, right? However you want to say it. To union with God, fellowship with God, communion with God. And I like that word communion because food, right?
Eating, yeah.
Yes. But here's what Basil the Great says about fasting. And it kind of speaks to Gregory and Elena's points with, the spiritual piece of it. So there's both a physical and a spiritual fast. In the physical fast, the body abstains from food and drink. In the spiritual fast, the faster abstains from evil intentions, words, and deeds. One who truly fasts abstains from anger, rage, malice, and vengeance. One who truly fasts abstains from idle and foul talk, empty rhetoric, slander, condemnation, flattery, lying, and all manner of spiteful talk. In a word, a real faster is one who withdraws from all evil. So how do we make that connection? How does that physical fast help us in the spiritual fast? Why not just say, well, I'll just fast from all evil? I don't need to fast from food. I just won't lie and have idle talk and slander.
How are we supposed to know what that is? That's kind of what I think of. It's like just saying, oh, I'm not going to be evil. Like if you think about someone who is like, I'm just thinking like personally, like a novice in a monastery, like you can't even understand you can't know what you don't even know. So like you have to start with the most basic things before you can move on to the most, intense things.
Mm-hmm. I have kind of an example of that, like in the most basic, and it goes back to your hangry comment, Andrew, where it happened just this past Lent. I think it was the first week of Lent, and you try to start off strong, and so you're not used to fasting. Here you are, and I was just like really snippy, just like that hanger, right? And what I feel like it does is it kind of takes away that surface layer of comfort, right? Mm-hmm. When you're well fed, when you're more likely in a good mood, your needs are met. But when you kind of take away that first layer of comfort, it kind of digs up the real stuff you're dealing with underneath. Like you can say, no, I'm a patient person. But when you take away, if you cut lunch in half, just say you have a little less lunch than before, suddenly you're like, oh, no, I'm not as patient as I thought I was. And suddenly God gives to you what you need to work on.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's good. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna bring up something from the comment section. Mark related fasting as training wheels for spiritual practice, because it's like the obedience and the voluntarily giving up whatever your passion is. So and then Annalisa right after that said fasting is also, it's a practical way to practice spiritual hurdles, so you can see kind of like that very like the tangible part. You can see what you're trying to avoid, or avoid the whatever the specific thing that you are being obedient in. You can see exactly how you're being obedient in fasting.
Yeah, absolutely, Annalisa. That's like, we eat every day, right? So we have an opportunity every day to have that help us be a link to God. Can fasting be harmful?
I think it reminds me of nothing that God has created is bad. If we follow our fasting rule and we are doing it with humility and the way we're supposed to be doing it, then it's not bad. But if we let it become the idol instead of the tool, then it can certainly be bad.
Yeah, it's going back to that good versus bad food type of deal, right? We're good because we're keeping the fast,
Mm-hmm.
or we're bad because we're not.
Mm-hmm.
And we can treat it just like another diet, right?
Yep.
There's a harm there. I mean, intermittent fasting, that's that's a thing that gets press for a way to lose weight, or a way to get the body of your dreams, right? Which is like a whole nother topic and has its own issues, for sure. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Andrew, with, if we use fasting for our own, for selfish reasons, as opposed to something to intentionally weaken us so that we know where our true strength comes from.
Yeah. I was going to say a little bit earlier, and I think it's relevant now too, is like, it's good to remember that like the ascetic practices like fasting are given to those of us who live in comfort, to like you said, strip away a little bit of that comfort to sort of emulate the suffering of the martyrs, without being like whips and bleeding kind of suffering. I mean, not eating meat and dairy is certainly not that the same as being martyred, but it's supposed to give us, like you were saying, that strip away that layer of pleasure. So I also think another way that like fasting can be harmful is not just when we like let it be a sense like a badge of pride or like an idol, but if we have an unhealthy relationship with food, and we try to and we go into a fast, like it could, I feel like if it's leading to more brokenness and not to more wholeness too in your life, like that's a time to reevaluate and to speak with your spiritual father about whether keeping the fast in the traditional way anyway is like is actually a spiritual practice that's like a good kind of asceticism, a good kind of asceticism that leads to wholeness and to martyrdom and witness, and not to like self-destruction.
Yeah. What does our church say that fasting needs to be accompanied by? What does it say?
Mm.
Do we know? Like,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Yep.
Thanks,
Mark says prayer and almsgiving.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. This is another great book that is really, really helpful. Great Lent by Alexander Schmemann. And he talks a lot about fasting in here too. And he uses the word harmful. Fasting can be dangerous if not accompanied by prayer. Yep. That some demons only come out through prayer and fasting. That's absolutely right, Gregory. I actually had that in my notes too. When Jesus heals the epileptic boy in Matthew, and his disciples are like, "What gives? Why couldn't we cast him out?" This kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting. Yes, what we talked about last week. That's right. And it also reminds me of another passage from Luke. When an unclean spirit goes out of a man, he goes through dry places, seeking rest, finding none. He says, "I'll return to my house from which I came." And he comes, he finds it all swept and put in order, and he brings his friends. Right? So we can do all the work to rid ourselves of evil. We can fast and we can, abstain from evil things. But if we're not putting good back in its place, we've only done half the job. So yeah, I think, fasting in this context of talking about food and food relationships and health, it has to be accompanied by prayer, and it's something to be practiced under the guidance of a spiritual father, and in the body of the church, right? To go back to Andrew's very first point, we're doing this together. So to kind of wrap up here, I think what Father Thomas presents here is really the purest form of caring for our bodies, right? And returning to the church's teaching. And in this way, caring for our souls congruently. I want to leave you with one more quote, this one from St. Gregory Palamas. Man as God's image is body and soul, and they interact and ascend towards God. And I think that just beautifully paints, and I don't think I sent that to you, Christina, but it beautifully paints that link. This is why we care for our bodies. Yes, thank you, magic. And this is why this maxim is so important. So I know we did go back to our journal prompt in the middle of our talk here, but if you want to share your thoughts about your last meal, and was that an opportunity for you to commune with God? And if not, what's one small thing that you can do to invite Christ to your table? And take that with you, or you can share it, or keep it in your journal, keep it in your heart, and just remember that however many times you eat a day, that's how many opportunities you have to remember God and keep him in your heart.
Thank you, Krista. We really appreciate you. If you guys have any questions, now's a good time to ask them. I think we have one that we can answer for sure, and then maybe we'll close in prayer. And if anyone else has more questions, you can still send them in, and we'll answer them after the prayer.
Yeah. One question we got from the Q&A was, I never fast right now, but how should I start?
Yeah, so that, as I mentioned, would be a good thing to discuss with your spiritual father or your parish priest, because they would certainly be able to give you a good starting point. The church does have a lot of guidelines, and the beautiful thing about it, though, is it's flexible, right? Just as personal nutrition is very flexible, and what's healthy and nourishing and good for you is different from your neighbor. Same with fasting. So I cannot answer that question specifically for you, but that would be a good place to start.
And I would not get discouraged when you, make mistakes or slip up, because I think as soon as you start getting too much into the mindset of like slip ups and mistakes in regards to fasting, like the quicker the food becomes the focus, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And that was a great point, Christina, because that's what I talk about with my patients in my secular job, right? To leave that room for forgiveness, because your self-worth is not attached to what you eat. When you become so focused on that, then it is hard to see beyond that. And I think we've said multiple times here, it can become an idol.
I think about St. Paul saying how the law was a pedagogue, a teacher that was really there to lead us to Christ, to show us how far on our own, like how far we'll always be on our own. And I think fasting, for me, that's one thing tangible I really have experienced in fasting, is like, you literally never do it right. and that's okay, because in part it's at least to show you like you're broken, and like you on your own are just not going to be righteous. Like you on your own are not going to be whole. Christ makes you whole. And so like, let this be an opportunity to say like, Lord, have mercy, and open up to him whenever, you break the fast, you fall short of whatever it is that you're trying to offer, and to kind of be okay with that and be blessed by it even.
Mm-hmm. Lovely.
All right, Krista, you want to pray for us?
Yes. Shine, shine, O New Jerusalem. The glory of the Lord has shone on thee. Exalt now and be glad, O Zion. Be radiant, O pure Theotokos, in the resurrection of thy Son. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, now and ever, and unto ages of ages. Amen. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. Through the prayers of our Holy Fathers, Lord Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen.
All right, I'm going to put Krista's email address in the chat. So if you want to follow up with her later on with other questions about food and nutrition and its relationship to our spiritual life, she's graciously offered for you all to be able to reach out to her directly. And if anyone has any questions now, we'll give you a minute or two to drop them in the chat or the Q&A. Otherwise, I'll go make my cookies.
That's right. And this time my mom was super, she had some fun shapes. So there's like the classic one that I showed you, but then she made some S's.
I love the S's.
And little boats, which was a new one.
Oh, that is a new one. I've never seen that. I like that.
A little inspiration for you.
Annalisa, Jesse, and Anna, we're so glad you came. Thanks for your thanks. We appreciate you.
Yes, thank you all. Oh, yes, you're welcome. Elena, Anna, Jesse, Annalisa. I think I knew 2 people tonight, so that's fun. It's fun to see the names.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Have a good night. We hope to see you next Monday. Is our last OCF at Home chapel. We're doing Compline and the Akathist of Thanksgiving. And next Thursday is our last reflection on Father Thomas' 55 Maxims with Deacon Nico Zetzis on, I don't remember which number, but it's when you fall, get up immediately again. Is that how it goes, Andrew?
I think so.
It'll be
I want to say 28, but don't hold me to that.
You know, I don't know. But it's a great one for us to close on because we've been talking a lot about all different kinds of small ways we can move forward in our spiritual life. And I think it's a great way to close to think about what we do when we don't live up to what the expectations we set for ourselves. So have a good night, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you, Krista.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much.